Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden here, and as I said in the introduction, my guest this week is Alex Oprey, who is the marketing and e-commerce director at Miller Harris. Alex, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Hayden. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thank you for doing this. I know you're a very busy man, and I've been really keen to catch up with you for a while. And I think, as we said before we came onto the pod, this thing around talking to interesting men in the space, but also just to try and understand the landscape and how the various pieces fit together. And I've long admired the creative roots and the work that Miller Harris does as a proudly British independent brand. And I think that I haven't really spoken to a marketeer before on the podcast, and there's so much that goes into so many different parts of it. But I've got so many questions, and I'm intrigued and fascinated about the work that goes on. I suppose once the juice is in the bottle, and then bringing it to life for the consumer, which is such an important part of any industry, I suppose, but particularly
Yeah,
with
it's a
fragrance, where it's
fascinating.
this sort of invisible thing, and you've got to kind of bring this world to life. Yeah, which must be a great challenge. Look, we're going to talk so much more about Miller Harris, but I'd love to know from you. I mean, what was your route into to Miller Harris and to sort of fragrance and beauty category? Did you start on that track,
I
or did you
didn't.
do other
No, I
things?
didn't start in. I didn't start in fragrance. I've been in marketing for 20 years, and I studied
Right.
marketing. That was the route I was going into, and and
So it's quite
I went.
intentional to be on that path and work in marketing.
I think so. Well, it was an accident to start with, in the sense of
Yeah.
green 18-year-old with skipping through a book trying to find something to do with his life.
Yeah,
But
just find this things
but
that
once
sound
once I
interesting.
once I settled on something, and you start to learn a subject, you
Yeah.
think you may as well apply it in life. But no, I worked in a few other categories. I worked in jewelry for nearly 8 years,
Oh, okay.
and that was the sort of starting point of my coming into the industry.
Was that sort of fashion jewelry or
Yeah,
kind
it
of
was fashion, a
high
little bit
end?
semi-fine. We went across categories, so we did some real kind of like fashion jewelry for like the big high streets, like the M&S's and Next,
Yeah.
and like Oasis and French Connection, if you remember when they were still around. I think French
Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we did bits of work with Swarovski and brands like that. But it was in the volume side of the industry.
Right.
But it was a real great sort of starting point in terms of particularly learning about retail. So that's early 2000s,
Yeah.
and then I came into London. Then I worked for a lingerie brand for a couple of years, which was
Oh.
again not an intentional move, but I did a couple
Yeah.
of years at a huge German company called Triumph,
Oh,
um,
yes. Yeah. Famous
um,
for bras.
famous for bras,
Yeah.
and learned about the world of bras for 2 years, and then
Could be worse, I suppose.
yeah, my name got thrown into the mix. I think there was a job at Floris, which is a really old heritage perfume
Yes.
on Jermyn Street,
Yes.
and
One of the most historic brands, isn't it?
yeah, no, family business. It's still being run by the family. Ed and Emily are ninth generation, and their father's still the chairman, and they were going through a period of reflection with the brand, and they brought a new CEO in to sort of take a look at what they were doing, um, and someone, I don't know, someone put his name in front of my name in front of him, and he asked me to come in to see him, and we chatted about what we do,
Mm.
and I spent a really happy 6 years there.
Yeah.
And it was a really exciting project. It was just one of those where we came in just at the right time, where you had something that was just so precious in terms of brand.
Mm.
And
So much heritage in that brand, isn't there? And
yeah, so much heritage, but
yeah.
and it was a combination of protecting that, but how does it look in the 21st century? How do they
Yeah.
turn that into something that um, has relevancy, an element of modernity, but at the same time respects its background, and can it live in both of those spaces? Um,
It's quite a difficult
and
dance to do that, I imagine, with a brand like Florist, because there is so much rich history there, but it can't be something that's sort of
you're constantly on a
antiquated and
tightrope with
sits
it
in
a
a
little bit,
sits in a
yeah.
box. Yeah.
It
How
can,
do
it
you
can
make
be
it kind of cool?
restrictive. It can be restrictive working with heritage brands for sure.
Mm.
It can be really because there's a desire to go back into the safety box and do the
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
the thing that you've always done, and sell the same things to the same people. But the customer gets older,
Yeah.
and you want to maintain. For me, whenever you're looking at a project like that, and you're looking at, it's never about evolution, changing things and ripping things up and trying to be something else. It's about trying to find what's the core of it that makes it special, what's the DNA of it. And
Yeah.
there's so many ways you can spin that, but as long as you don't lose the reason that
Essence.
people
Yeah.
believe. In marketing, we talk about reason to believe, and if that reason to believe is not lost, you can kind of really go in lots of different ways and do lots of exciting things.
Mm.
And we just had a lot of fun there. You know, we were working above the shop. There was some really great people came into that business. We were able to kind of cherry pick, and the name kind of gets you a long way. You know, I've
Yes.
worked in brands before where you can knock on the door and try and get something, and people have, you have to sort of really fight for it. Whereas with Floris, it was the other way around. Although it was a really old heritage brand, it was sort of, there was this quiet respect within the,
Yeah.
not just even in the fragrance world, but within the luxury world as well, within that kind of classic British sensibility of
Mm.
Mayfair and St James's. So um, yeah, I had a great time there. And we still talk about it fondly. We did, and we're really proud of the work we did there because that brand's doing really well now,
Yeah.
and it's in a good place. So that was good fun, but that was my foray into fragrance.
Yeah.
I started getting more involved in the products at that point, in terms of
So
product
was
launch.
part of your role, Alex, to sort of refine the offer in terms of, how many different fragrances there were and edit that down a bit, or
It
was
was
that
There was
part
a
of what
little
you
bit
did?
of editing. There was a little bit of trying to. There's some commercial things in like that. They're building an
Yeah.
e-commerce business that just didn't exist, but from a product point of view, it was more. We were selling a lot of soap at the point
Yeah.
I arrived,
Which is very
and
good soap as well.
really good soap. We were selling probably a bit too much of it, and sometimes at discount in sales and things like that. And the
Yeah.
challenge was how do we go back to being a fragrance house? You know,
Mm.
my pitch when I went in was you're the oldest fragrance house in the world, and there are other people saying that they're playing the heritage ticket, but you guys are the real guys,
Yeah.
and you're owned privately. You know, you've got this amazing space in German Street. You've got all the storytelling. So let's start being a bit more confident again and going back to
Yeah.
being a fragrance-led business. So we really
They've got all
focused.
those old books, haven't they, of like orders from Winston Churchill and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. It's incredible.
and there's still people going on those tours and going around the back.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like um, I feel sorry for Ed. The amount of times he must have done that tour of everybody and he's the son. I'd see him every
Just
day
trots it
downstairs,
out. Yeah.
just going through the same piece. But yeah, it was really good, and we tested things and we tried from a marketing point of view. We just had a lot of fun with it. You know, we had this really mild thing. I went to an event maybe 6 months ago. I went to an event and it was about AI and it was this really modern thing. And this guy was talking about the metaverse
Mm.
and I came out afterwards and he was in the lift with me and we walked out and we were chatting about our careers and what we'd done and how he ended up in this sector. And he's like, "Oh no, I used to work in publishing. I did this." And I said, "Oh, I used to work at Floris." And he said, "Oh no, no way. Like I went to an event at Floris and it was the best experience I've ever had of like a heritage brand doing something exciting. You, they took us down to the basement and we had this like massive art display and we were doing all this and I was like, that was me. We did that. That was the first thing we did
Oh,
within like
cool.
3 months." And this guy was like 10 years later remembered this, and it was that feeling we had at the time of just there's not a lot we couldn't do because
Yeah.
we had a little bit for a few years. Certainly we had a little bit of a free
That's
reign
some
and a
sort of
remit just to
license.
be
Yeah.
brave.
Yeah.
They had this amazing basement underneath the store with like old safes in it that they couldn't find the keys to, and there was all the
Oh, I love
the
it.
accounts files from 1972 in there and things like that. And we worked with the new craftsman and we got this artist in and she created all these amazing um, fabrics that she dyed with kind of like natural florals and things like that, and we tied it into the fragrance. And we made this amazing space and it looked really cool. And we ended up just having a massive party down there. And you would never get away with it now because nobody would ever sign it off
Yeah.
from health and safety. But I
Health and
remember we
safety
invited
issues.
we invited some of the buyers to try and show them the brand was kind of moving forward. But it was a Friday night, and they all kind of came in high heels and were dressed up, and it was this thing, and we were like, "No, you've got to go down into the basement." They could just look on their faces. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like a good idea, but everyone had a lot of fun.
Oh,
So
that's good.
it was gratifying when he brought that up. Just 10 years later, he
Yeah.
remembering.
Remembered that event. So then
Um,
did you go to Miller Harris from Flores?
yeah, so I went across with the same CEO. So he
Right.
got asked to go to Miller Harris. He was invited to come and speak to them. This was just in the start of COVID as well, so it was a really interesting time. There was a shuffling around of people in the industry that happens
Mm.
sometimes. And, the management team at Miller Harris uh, were migrating to Creed at the time,
Oh,
so
okay.
there's a
Yeah.
few shuffles around. John was asked to come and look at Miller Harris, and quite quickly said to me, "Would I come and have a look at it as well with him?" Um, so now I'm looking at 10 years being in fragrance,
Yeah.
and then once you get in a category that you love, you sort of feel that you might stay.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it off air as well, didn't we? I mean, it is a category that if you can't find joy and pleasure in the work and the creativity and the things the good things that can happen around in fragrance, it'd be a real shame. But that thing around I mentioned in the intro about obviously fragrance, the actual juice itself being invisible, and the challenge around bringing it to life. I mean, as a marketeer, that must be that must be the stuff that gets you excited.
Yeah, and the various parts to that as well. There's so many parts to taking a fragrance to market.
Yeah.
We always say it can take up to 2 years to bring a fragrance to market, sometimes longer if the idea's been around for a while. And but as a category, it's one, the people in the industry are lovely. It's a really nice space to work,
Yeah. I totally
right from
agree.
the bottom.
Mm.
And but from a product's point of view, it's just really there's a lot of emotion tied up in fragrance. I know people talk
Mm.
about that a lot, but um, it's something that's very personal to people, and everyone's got a view on it. We talked before about that visibility of it, but it's so subjective in terms of how you interpret a smell and your personal
Yeah.
feelings towards it, that it can go so many different ways. So that when you're marketing it and you're building this kind of world and this story, it's really sometimes you can go too deep and you can go too
Mm.
far in terms of the exploration. I certainly have a habit of doing that and constantly told by my team to stop complicating
Just
things.
simplify it, Alex.
Simplify it, back to basics of marketing. But it's yeah, I love working in the category. It's but there are lots of different parts to it. From the beginning
Yeah.
bit right through to kind of the execution.
And I was so
And
fascinated by what you said there, because I suppose everyone's reaction to a fragrance and emotions, and it is purely subjective. So there's a real challenge there, isn't there? In you have to, part of your brief
yeah,
is to sort of create this world and explain it and communicate it and all those things. But yeah, that challenge around offering your interpretation, or the brand, the perfumer's interpretation of that world, but try and draw people in and make it compelling for the consumer, like you say,
yeah, yeah.
without it getting too specific and go, well, that it doesn't do that for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder
And
how that
I think
works.
I try to do that quite a lot, and I think um, I've learned that with something so subjective, don't try and tell the customer who they are. For one, don't be so, and don't tell.
Right.
Almost give. You're trying to give a feeling and a sort of space that lots of people feel comfortable in. And obviously, marketing speak, everyone's got their positions and
Yeah.
pricing architecture and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, once you decide what you're going to do and you feel that it fits with the DNA of the brand you're in, or fits with the DNA of what we should be doing, you try and create a feeling and a mood with the campaign and with what you're trying to, the story
Mm.
you're trying to tell, that isn't so you have to be this person to like this
Yeah.
fragrance.
Yeah.
Especially when you're saying you have to be cool to like this, or you have to be edgy to like
Yeah.
this, or you have to be
Yeah. Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
one.
Don't
And
want that.
I try and avoid that space because I
Yeah.
just find it because it has to be subjective and it has to feel the especially like I look at Miller Harris as a slight modern heritage brand. It's kind of gone on a
Mm.
journey itself. It's 24 years since its foundation. It's had its own undulations in terms of who it's been, and we've always tried to kind of well, what was the starting point and what's been consistent throughout its life, and when you try and when you work that bit out and you know what that space is, then you can give the campaign and the storytelling enough room to appeal to a broader range of people that it doesn't
Yeah.
feel divisive or alienating to anybody, or you're just trying to make people feel
Yeah.
the motion, right?
Exactly.
You want people to look at that and say, I love that storytelling, and
I
we
want to dive into that world and find out
yeah, and
more.
I love
Yeah.
this. I love the storytelling part of it, and if anything, I try and make it as rich as possible because we've done all that work on our side.
Yeah.
Why would you not share
Yeah.
that with the person that's buying into it?
Well, if I may say, I mean, I think it's certainly over the last few years, some of the campaigns. I mean, immediately something that springs to mind is that Hydra Fig
The
um,
huge fig one,
camp.
yeah.
Yeah,
I,
Hydra Fig. Yeah,
I loved
it's
that.
so
I used
beautiful.
to say
So
hydrofig, and then I was told by a Greek friend it's definitely not hydra, it's hydra. So
Hydra,
I was
Hydra Fig.
corrected
Fair
and
play.
embarrassed at an event.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many times I just walk around getting perfume names wrong
Yeah.
24/7. So I'm kind of, yeah, it's the sort of how it goes, I think, isn't it? And especially with foreign spellings and stuff. But yeah, that campaign. I mean, it was set. So where was it set at? It was Greek. Was it a Greek
So
island?
there's a Greek island called Hydra,
On Hydra, of course.
and we one of the key elements of Miller Harris is it's always been a storytelling brand. Like all of the
Yeah,
fragrances, right from the beginning, have had this sort of. We always talk with people in the store. You could almost close your eyes and you tell them the story, and then you smell it, and you should be able to kind of almost like viscerally sort of understand kind of where you are, and you could be in that
yeah,
place. And that's from Foyt de Bax. There's a man walking down Boulevard in Paris, and you get there's a whole story. He's going for a coffee, and he's got a cigarette, and he's having a drink, and it was always about building this sort of world that you can
yeah.
imagine, and then applying the fragrance to it. So Hydra, I knew about the island because of I love Leonard Cohen, and he spent a long time living on that island.
Because it
Right.
has a kind of bohemian quality, doesn't it?
Yes.
Or certainly in the 60s, 70s, people used to go there and write poetry or songs
Yeah,
or
they don't have,
stuff
you
like
don't
that.
have cars there, and
Right.
I watched a documentary, and it just really spoke to me in terms of it felt very Miller Harris in terms of the way that we approach our storytelling, that
Mm.
sense of just seeking that tranquility and that sort of beauty in the everyday of life. And so we went and explored it, and I went and spoke with Emily Bouge, who created the fragrance.
Mm.
We were on one of our visits to Grasse, and we
She's
spent.
great.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and we never really start with a brief. We don't really build briefs. We just I went and we were in there, and we had a conversation saying, look, this is something I want to explore. Do you know about this island? And she went away and did some research, and she was working on something, an accord, so not a, but she's been working on something around the swimming pool, this idea of water, and she wanted to kind of
Mm.
play. No, and then you just start building blocks of ideas,
And it was
and
all shot so beautifully, wasn't it? That I don't know
yeah, we took a
the
photographer
cinematography.
called Louis Sheridan down there. He's really great at that sort of voyeuristic glimpse into kind of like
Yeah,
somebody else's day. And he just told his story about and he shot the campaign as well and came with us. And um, I didn't get to go on that trip. That really
damn
frustrated
it.
me. And that's
Yeah, it
part
looked
of
beautiful.
yeah. You have to send your team because you realise it's not your responsibility anymore to go on the shoots.
Yeah,
You have someone
and you
else
can't
to go.
justify like 5 days in Hydra
Five days in Greece. But thank you. Yeah,
necessarily.
I appreciate that because that was one that we really enjoyed, and that fragrance is doing really well. We're seeing a really great response to it. And
Well, and I guess that's the point, isn't it? I suppose it's there's we all think of brands where do these incredibly lavish high production shoots, but I suppose for you as a marketeer, the end point, the measure of success is people enjoying it, talking about it, but selling. You've got
Yeah,
shops,
you,
you've
you
got
want you want to
concessions. You
sell
want to
it.
sell it.
And fragrance is really fascinating in the sense that there's not really there are some rules to what will and won't work, but as when you work in the industry, you realize how much product comes to market, and
Oh my goodness.
you'll see this, right? It's
Yes. Yes.
and then how much then's not there 12 months later in terms of
Yeah.
novelties, um, and I always approach it with, and maybe I'm naive, but I always approach it with, where will this be in 10 years? Like, how do I
Yeah.
put something down that stands the test of time? And what you find when you do it that way, sometimes fragrances do take a long time. You know,
Mm.
Aventus was out for a number of years before it became what
Mm.
it is now. Um, but they trusted that the juice was good, and it builds slowly. And I
Yeah.
think I learned that at Florist. Actually, there was a fragrance they launched in the '70s, um, and um, and Ed always used to say to me when it came out, his father or his grandfather was constantly trying to discontinue it because they never sold any of it. And he said it was 10 years before it actually went somewhere. And it's called Elite, but it's now one of the best sellers they had from the classic range. And he
Isn't that
sort of said,
funny how to see different times or something
yeah,
sparks an
something
interest
kicks in,
somewhere?
and if you
Yeah.
trust that what you've done is good, you have to sort of stick with it a little bit. And sometimes you can put a great campaign out and it's instant, and
Yeah.
sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to find its place, and you have to have
Find
that
its
confidence to stick with it a little bit.
yeah, find the consumer. But I suppose also, in all as you're describing that the sort of gestation period and getting it all done from the right from the perfumer to the shop floor can be such a long period of time.
Mhm.
You must have to maintain that faith, and it must feel very miserable. Not, I'm sure, not in Miller Harris, but if you're ever launching something and you kind of have a feeling right from the get go that it's not going to connect. I mean, you surely you have to sort of, because Miller Harris don't put out hundreds of
No,
different new
we
fragrances every year. You have to believe in what you're doing, right? And go, this I think there's a place for this, and
yeah.
this is why we're doing it. I mean, maybe that's obvious, but
If you're only putting one a year out as well, you really have to believe in it.
yeah.
And we switch between a few different models, but the sort of bellwether for me, and I found this recently, and particularly with Hydra Fig, is that having worked on it from the beginning, from the initial sort of kernel of an idea, and
Mm,
me and Emily sat in grass having a chat, and really it's just like sitting over dinner and talking about it. It's not there's no sort of like fancy process. You just go for a
yeah,
drink, and you talk,
whiteboards and stuff.
yeah, and it just evolves, and you share things, and then right through to, you have to sell that vision internally because there's so many touch points of people
Yeah,
from manufacturing right through to the marketing,
bottle
um,
design and all of that
bottle
stuff.
design, all of
Yeah.
those parts that come to it. And then there's a huge selling process in terms of the retailers and where it's going to be sold and the training part.
Mm,
You know, we sell in 50 markets globally, so you're looking at selling this to your Asian partners and to your Middle East
yeah.
partners and to your American partners. And there's a whole process of it, and I find I'm involved in that right through the journey, right? And usually you can tell if it's going to work based on how you feel about it when you get to the end of that 2 year process. So
Yeah.
I have
Do
been,
you
I
still
sat there.
love it?
Well, especially because you smell it so much, you sit in so many processes of, and if you're still loving it at the point when I meet you at the press event and we're talking about the
Yeah.
launch, if I'm still enthusiastic at that point, it's generally a sign that I think it's a good one.
Good. Well, I mean, there's been, I think, yeah, in the last couple of years, there's been countless really good campaigns, and the Black Datura recently, which was
Yeah, Black
again,
Secure
it
is
was
a
so
great one.
beautiful. I mean, it was such, yeah, it just looked
That's
like a sort of
magical.
really glossy, but the idea of that sort of kind of crazy evening out and party time and a bit of danger. It just, yeah, it looked
Yeah,
stunning. So
my team can take credit for that one. I've got a really great brand manager called Laurel, and she concocted a lot of that world for me, and
yeah,
did an amazing job at executing that.
again, I think as it's trying to sit outside of any kind of professional or writing thing, just to come at these things as a consumer and just look at some of those campaigns, and just it feels like a really inviting world that you want to experience, smell, be get involved in. And I suppose that's the first step, isn't it, to sort of get people excited enough to perhaps go go into their local department store or a Miller Harris shop and actually get their
Yeah.
nose on it and go, I get this. I want to be part of this.
Yeah, well, the platforms on which you're having the conversation with the customer now have completely changed as well. So
Yes.
um, you have to build this world out online. You have to build this world out socially. You have to build this world out through partners and people. Having almost like a collective,
Yeah.
a group of people that are sort of ambassadors that buy into what you're trying to do. So
Yeah.
so that visual storytelling becomes really key.
Yeah.
But also
It's
the
got to
written
work
word.
really hard, hasn't it, in different places now?
Yeah, and I still love the writing process. We've got some.
Mm.
We do a lot of writing internally. I like writing. Laurel again, who works for me, she's a great writer, and we've got people that we sometimes go to outside of the business, and or even muses like people like who are poets and musicians and things that will
Yeah.
get to write things
Yeah.
for us. And I think there's a lot to be said still for that. The language of fragrance. It's a
Mm.
really it's a hard there's a lot of fluff in there, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
You would have read a number of press releases. It can get very
Yeah.
um, over the top. Um, but if you can write well around fragrance and find the right words, it's really powerful because it's a hard scent is a hard thing to write about or talk about because there isn't really a language for scent.
That's right.
It
That's
leans
right.
quite heavily on I guess the food world and taste, and we use a
Yeah.
lot of words around color and
Yeah.
um,
And other
feeling and mood
senses,
around
don't we?
fragrance,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have its own language. You don't have words that are specific. So um, and then it drifts into like you can get into what's a romantic fragrance, what's a
I
sensual
know.
fragrance, how do you define that word into something that's invisible and that's a smell. So
You're right.
um,
And we talk about this a lot. I mean, generally, but certainly on the podcast, and what you don't word soupy kind of stuff where, we've all seen those meaningless because we've heard these phrases before or campaigns where it's, people just, running into the sea and proclaiming their liberation or we all know what they are and they're kind of mocked and sort of satirized everywhere. But it's a real life challenge that you have as a marketeer and a brand manager and coming up with new things that to find that sweet spot where it doesn't feel hackneyed and this using words that have just used all the time but not too specific that it alienates people as well. So there's and how you do that through visuals, through music, through cinematography, video, all of that stuff. It's fascinating.
yeah, it's super bad, and we lean a lot into the art world, music,
Yeah.
the written word to tell that story, and I think what I found, particularly across all industries recently, and I think it's a really good thing for brands and for consumers and customers who are buying things, is that um, the sort of social media's opened everything up, and brands have had to become certainly a lot more authentic, and that's not
Yes.
necessarily just saying we're authentic. You're almost like lifting the lid up and letting people in.
Yeah.
So when you're writing something about something or you've created something, if anything, the more honest you can be, the more this is why we did this, and this is, and
Yeah.
not trying to kind of spin that marketing piece
Yeah.
because
Just
I
bullshit.
think the customer actually prefers to understand what they're buying into, and that especially in luxury and niche, that's why I'm buying into you. I
Totally.
could go and buy so many other brands. The
Yeah.
market's full of lots of brands, and you're trying to speak to somebody and say, we're something that you could buy into and
This is
believe
for
in. We've
you.
made this really well, and we've put a lot of care into it. And here's this rich story. But when I'm talking about it, I'm not going to spin it. I'm just going to tell you as honestly as possible why we've done it. And I sometimes have
Totally.
to write quotes for press releases and kind of put my name on and say this is why we did this.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm doing that, I always try and be as direct as possible and treat it like I'm speaking to the person that might actually want to buy
Yeah.
the products
And
and
I
not
think,
sound
we've
good.
seen that so much in, I don't know, did it start in food or, that idea of provenance and the consumer now, and it's certainly drifted into beauty and fragrance, that we're much more, we're interested in the story of how it came about, the sustainability piece, all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stuff that someone like Mary Portas talks about as well. I think it's yeah, it can't be a bad thing for a brand to be open handed and say this is why, and also I suppose there's sometimes that conversation, and we have it in music as well, but certainly with fragrance where that kind of slightly lazy idea of, oh well, it's just alcohol and water and a bit of oil. So how on earth can someone charge you £150 or more or whatever it is? But what you're talking to there, that idea of explaining about the raw materials and the craft of it means that people, I suppose, you need people to feel comfortable with the price point, and this is why we're not ripping you off. It's not,
Yeah,
there's
you
a lot of
can't.
expense in all of that.
I completely agree. And you have to be comfortable with what you're a making and b selling,
Yeah,
and have that of trust in actually going and showing people behind the closed door. And
yeah,
I say this with a genuine level of authenticity when you actually then go into to the perfume side of the industry and you work with the perfumers and you go and see the people that work in perfume manufacturing, or certainly the people I work with. I've never worked with a group of people that are more passionate about what they do. I've
no, it's
yet
so
to
good
meet
to
anybody
hear.
I've not thoroughly enjoyed working with in that space of it.
Yeah,
And it's unbelievable the things that go into um, that little bit of essential oil that you're kind of
yeah,
adding into when
yeah,
you talk about the alcohol and the water. There's um, there's a huge amount of people putting a huge amount of effort
yeah,
into it, particularly around the natural world, because you're going globally to
yeah.
source these materials.
Sourcing things from everywhere.
And we work with a couple of, I work with Emily, I work with Matthew Nadan, and we work with some really great perfumers, um, and that's the fun side of the job for me. I love that
Mm.
part. I love going and spending time with them, um, and them mocking my terrible French. But
It's one of my ambitions this year. So, I've been doing this, writing about it for a few years, but I still haven't been to Grasse, or I haven't seen seen where some of the raw materials come from, or some of the flower fields, and I really want to do that because I think that
we should
sense
sort
of
that out.
understanding the process is really critical, and I'm hoping to do that this
It's
year, but
not
I can't
yeah,
wait.
it's not one of those things that you're disappointed when you get there. But having done it a couple of times, you sort of
Oh, good.
you go down and you're like, no, this is the real deal. And this
But and as you say that, people would be astounded by the amount of, talk about flowers in this instance, but the amount of actual flowers and blossom and stuff that's needed to create a tiny bit of the oil.
yeah,
So
science is the mad bit. And the other thing
that's
that
the magic.
I've always taken for granted is that essentially you're selling an IP. So it's got
Yeah,
once you've created it, there's a responsibility on us to make sure it's the same every time
yeah,
to a certain
yeah.
degree. And
And
obviously,
there's
when
variables, isn't there, in terms
there's
of
variables, and when you're
yeah,
speaking to, and then when you've got that element of subjectivity about how it feels, and the skin changes things, and
yeah,
there's so many different parts to it. And there's just the amount of people that work just in that bit, just in the science and the
mm,
DNA of making sure that you're getting that consistency. That just that lab alone, you could spend half a morning just
yeah.
watching them doing their little their graphs and stuff. It's good fun.
I know, and it's all this whole world that's sort of going on behind the simple spritz in the morning. But look, we will talk more about Miller Harris in a little bit. But I'm, as the name of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and there's an element of trying to find out about men's morning and evening routines and the kind of products that they like to use. Just because I think it's a nice thing to share, and I know people have got some tips and some products they might not have heard of. So I've no doubt you get sent lots of things, and you're across the market of both beauty and fragrance. So I'd love to find out a little bit more about your routine, Alex. What do you use in the mornings and evenings?
It's got more. It's not particularly extravagant. The older I've got,
Yeah,
the more things you try and start adding
yeah,
adding to the arsenal on a morning basis when you start worrying about things. But yeah, I have a really simple. I use I've got a really good friend in the industry, and I started using his cleanser recently. He's a guy called James Chase, and he's
Oh,
created a
right.
brand called Baz
Yes,
Co.
Baz Co. James. Yeah, he's been on the podcast. In fact.
Yeah, so I've known
Yeah,
James for a long time. We were all friends
that's great product. The Baz
when he was
Co.
at the
stuff's
distillery,
great.
and he sent me some bits, and I've been using his exfoliator cleanser,
Yeah.
uh, sort
Have
of
you used the the sort of bath shower
yeah,
gel yet
the
with the
shower
Baz?
gel. Yeah,
It's really good.
the quality on that's is good enough to be a face wash. To be honest,
Yeah,
it's
and
really
he's
good.
doing really innovative stuff with the vertical farming and everything, isn't he?
Yeah, he came to me like 3 years ago with that and said, "Look, I've got this idea and I want to stay in the farming space because he's a farmer essentially, but
Yeah,
I want to do it in a sustainable way." And like I think Basil's got something going for it in vertical farming. What do you think of this? And I was just like, "Just don't tell anyone you're doing this because it's such a brilliant
yeah,
idea. Like
so
you've
clever.
got it nailed straight away." And
Yeah,
so I've watched closely his journey because he's doing a really good job with that. He's got a lot going for him. He's got a really great personality and really great at what he
yeah,
does.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He's the right ambassador for it as well, isn't he? He can sort of tell
absolutely.
the story. Yeah.
So I use his cleanser, and then I use some Aesop skincare. So
Do you?
I'll
Good
use like
stuff.
we've got body and hand lotions at Miller Harris, so I'll always start there as a sort of base level. Then I have like an Aesop eye cream, like the parsley seed one,
Yeah.
and then they've got like a antioxidant sort of like facial treatment. It's just a droplet of.
Oh, okay.
My wife bought me
Not.
that for my birthday, and I started
Is it
using that.
good?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's not too greasy and you don't need much. It's just almost like something to layer on top of a moisturizer that
Right. Okay.
you've already used, and that's it really. I have to do. It takes a long time to do my hair because I've got
What do
too
you
much
put?
oil.
It's a good head of hair, Alex. What do you put? What do you put in there?
I use just a. It's called a Grubby Putty. It's an Australian brand. I'm not sure. I think I found it on Amazon.
Grubby putty.
Yeah, it's like but it's I don't put much in it to be honest. It's and it's I'm in that winter season, so I've got a very rare moment of not wearing a hat at the moment.
Right.
I
And
generally wear a hat from basically from November to.
do you tend to keep that sort of length though? Because it's quite, it's
This is
quite
quite long
long.
at the moment. It
Yeah.
wouldn't normally be this long. It's getting cut next week, but no, I don't. I keep it reasonably long, and I don't, and
Yeah.
hopefully not in a midlife crisis kind of way.
No. No. You're probably too young to remember, but it's giving me vibes of Lloyd Cole.
Yeah, I'm too young to remember that.
Yeah, good. But he's a good-looking guy, so it's not like it's there's no diss there. Yeah, Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. Anyway,
I'll take a
brilliant
look.
'80s band. Have a look. I think you'll be all right with it. And I should give an honourable shout out. You're talking about products and Miller Harris products. Now I'm worried now about pronouncing it wrong, but the your body wash, Lumiere Dore,
Lumiere de Riz, yeah, that's
Lumiere
another
Dore,
wash.
that body wash is amazing.
Yeah, the orange blossom neroli
Yeah,
combination
so
in that
good.
is fantastic. It's like, especially when it's this sort of dark. Well, it's not too dark now, but
Yeah,
winter months going into
sort of
spring,
perks you
it's
up.
just a real blast of sunshine.
It
And
really is. It's really good.
yeah,
And
that's a Matthew Nadan fragrance as well. Like I think that came out in 2016.
right,
He's that guy's a wizard. He's got some really good
yeah,
fragrance.
yeah. And obviously the big one on fragrance, and we, I'm sure we could talk for hours about all your favorites through the years. But how do you approach? I suppose a more interesting way in is how do you approach it in the morning? Do you have to stay fragrance free for evaluating stuff at work, or are you sort of testing the new thing that's coming, or how do you go about it?
I'm not evaluating every day certainly. So I have a wardrobe of fragrances
Mm,
across the brand, and just for my own, um, it's quite a tight range at Miller Harris, but there's maybe 26, and it's good to just wear everything just because you're constantly reminding yourself of the evolution of like the
yeah.
fragrances that were there that Lynn made in the early sort of 2000s, and some
Mm,
beautiful things that we have in the range there, right through to kind of like the things that we've been doing more recently. So I try and mix it up, and then we've always got something coming. So we've got 4 fragrances launching this year across 2 drops, and
have you? Because I was going to ask you about what's coming. That's nicely
yeah, we've
segued
got
there.
this year's going to be really. I'm really excited about this year. So we have a fragrance called Skirt So.
Yes, which is
which
great.
which is
One of my wife's favourites.
a really great concept that was launched in 2018. And the idea was that if you read the page of a book, if you open a book and you sometimes you can read it and it almost like you can see the scent dripping off the page because
Yeah.
it's so the explanation of it. And Sarah, who was the CEO at the time, was reading "Tender Is the Night," and she
Ah,
was at the page. She was almost like this. Almost you could almost smell this page because it talked about kaleidoscopes of colour and blooms of peonies and this almost like sweet shop sort of scent.
yeah.
And there's a whole romance to that, and you've got the sense of this, the French Riviera
Mm,
um, and Cannes, and all that kind of world. And she just gave that page to Matthew Nadan and said, "Make me a fragrance," and
I
that's
love
all
it.
he had to work with. Um, and it's
That's
the it's
creativity, isn't it?
become the one of the benchmarks of Miller Harris. It's a global best-selling brand, and and we've always wanted to explore that world further. So this year we're taking that from being one fragrance to 5 fragrances. So we're adding four in, but it's
A
four.
part of the Scherzo world, or
No,
that
it's
just
not. It's
take
kind
that
of
idea of
the concept is the same. So
right.
it's four different, and we're looking to how to expand that outside of just novels, but into poetry, music, lyrics. There's a whole
Great.
exploration of that. But these first four are all novels, and they're geographically all slightly different. So we have a sort of Scottish British story. So we've got um, to the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. There's a page in there, and then there's
Yeah.
a page from the Age of Innocence, which is kind of like this New York story.
Right.
There's a page, The Sun Also Rises, which is this Parisian story of, and we did the same thing. I read a lot of books,
Yes. Good way to read.
and we gave those to um, we gave them to a few perfumes actually. We've gone a bit wider and we spent about a year backing and forth. This year we've got two in May. We have um, a fragrance coming in, which is the fourth one, which is a Dream of the Red Chamber, which is a classic Chinese text. And then the Sun Also Rises text comes in May as well, and then the other two drop in September. So for
Oh, I
us, that
can't wait
world
for
is
those.
expanding, and the whole storytelling part of it.
Yeah.
We're sort of in the final stages of bringing that to you. So I'll make sure you get those sent
Oh,
across because
thank you.
um,
But that
they're
feels
really
like
good.
Alex. Another, we talked about different inspirations and different, ways in, and I think that we obviously talk about music often and travel, but literature is a great way to as a sort of access point, isn't it,
Yeah,
for people? Because
yeah,
often, if you like a certain, doesn't even have to be a certain author, but a certain sort of genre, or you understand the world of a certain book, that can help,
yeah.
can't it? I think sort of. So I understand approximately where this perfume lives and what sort of space it inhabits. I think it's going to be
And
really
what's
fantastic.
fascinating about it is that because we went to a few perfumers on each of them, how interpretation from a perfumer's point of
Yes.
view is
Yeah.
completely different.
All different for all of them.
If you took just one page of text and said, go and make a fragrance from this, how wide that can go in terms of their
Yeah.
personal inspiration of it, because there'll be specifics, there'll be words and references to ingredients and that you can absolutely lean into, so you kind of get a sense where it might go. But what I found fascinating
Mm,
was more how wide it could go. Um,
yeah.
so um,
And
so
that's the
yeah,
joy of it, isn't it? The interpretation from the different perfumers and
yeah,
everything.
exactly. So that's been a really great project to work on. So I'm
Great.
wearing that a lot at the moment, just
Right.
again in anticipation of that coming. And then I tend, when I go outside of Miller Harris and wearing other brands, I tend to have a sort of an allegiance and a loyalty to the perfumers that I work with
Right.
who work outside of
Yeah.
our brands. So
See what they're
I'll look
doing
at
elsewhere.
I look at what else Matthew Nadan's done, or I look at what else Kareen's done, or Emily's done, because they work on selectively on other projects as well. So um, I like Boundless, which is one of Kareen's for Amouage. I think that's a really lovely
Yes.
fragrance.
That's really good.
I've been wearing, I know my pronunciation is going to tell, but Le Vert, which is a Killian fragrance. It's
Oh, I don't know that
sort
one.
of aniseed mandarin note that Matthew made for Killian. So that's a lovely fragrance. Um, I think the first fragrance I ever wore was probably Terre de Hermes
Yeah.
back in the day,
Classic. Yeah.
which is still a great fragrance. So yeah, I do step out of Miller Harris, but generally there's enough there for me to
Yeah.
not like it very
Well,
often.
I suppose it is again in your role. It's probably useful to have a sense of what else is going on
What else
in
is
some of the
going on?
places.
Yeah.
What yeah, what people are doing and how they're doing their campaigns. But yeah, I mean,
There was
there's
much of a view of not trying to. It's good to know, but it's also good to
you don't want to copy
not know,
or
right?
be
So you don't want to feel like
influenced.
it's everyone because what happens is everyone sees the same trend reports, everyone sees the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
market research documents, and you sometimes feel like you see the market move a certain way, and you know why it's gone because everyone's
yeah.
following the same
Everyone's read the
thing,
same thing.
and
Maybe it's all going to
sometimes
be
it's
about
nice to kind of bring
pistachio or
on
something, and
exactly, yeah, and there's a reason that works, and it's not my job to ignore that, but at the same time, it goes back to that. It's got to have value to the DNA of the perfume house that you work
yeah,
for. So
yeah, yeah,
what is a Miller Harris fragrance, and therefore, where does this apply to us, and how would we interpret that if we are
mm,
going to do something in that space of um, without so much as
yeah.
just following and following a lead.
Just following
Um,
the herd.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, Alex, so the name of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and part of it is also just to understand the guest's view of themselves, really, and self image, and sort of using this.
yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how you feel about your life stage, and what looks back at you now when you're getting ready in the morning.
I don't. It's not something I spend a huge amount of time. Certainly less so now. Being,
Yeah, got
I've,
young
I've, spent-
kids, and you're
I've got kids.
busy.
I'm. I always look tired. Is the general feeling, but that's just having children.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the older I've got, the less it's really bothered me. I've realised you get the skin gets a bit thicker, and you realise that it's less important to um, to who you are, um,
yeah.
and and um, and you just get more comfortable in yourself. You learn to realise that it's an extension of you, what you see, but at the same time,
I think
um,
so.
the more people you meet and the more people you work with and the more people you bring into your world, whether it's friends or family and all of that, you kind of start realising that people um, see this version of you,
See
and that's
beyond that. Yeah,
and beyond that, and you
yeah,
Um, so I've really got very hung up on it, and I also am aware that you can look back at different periods of your life. When I was before I had children, when I got married, and when I was younger, and you're never ever at a point where you feel
completely happy. No,
completely
no,
yeah, and but no one really cares as much as you. So just
that's
kind of
true.
try and not hang up on it too much, and be grateful that we talked about before we came on. I'm approaching 40. I've got young children. I've got aging parents, and you're at a stage in life where there's a lot going on, and career and
Pulled in
works
different directions. Yeah,
all in different directions. So you, if anything, it's great to look in the mirror in the morning and feel like not feel tired,
yeah,
feel
yeah.
ready for the day. But there's a sort of self confidence now that kind of has to go beyond
Yes, the
the
purely,
fantasy of
yeah,
going up and kind of
superficial.
feel when you
Yeah,
look in the mirror.
but it sounds also that you have from the little we've spoken. There's a nice balance there. You live by the sea. You can
Yeah,
hybrid work, do some stuff in obviously travel with work, but do some work in London and do some work by the coast, which must be a nice combination.
it's a lovely combination. And I love living by the sea. I'm from Yorkshire, so I'm a landlocked
Yeah,
being. But when I came down here 20 years ago and found myself by the sea, it opens your eyes to a different way of living.
yeah,
It's
I
amazing. So
totally.
whenever I go traveling now, whenever I travel with work, and I'm anywhere near the sea, it's just I have a lovely connection with it. I don't know
Mm.
loads of people do, and it's the reason people move to the coast. But I feel very content here, so that helps. And being in London a couple of days a week is great for me because it opens your eyes to how amazing London can be and what an
Yeah,
incredible city
you see
that
it
is.
slightly differently again, so slightly
Yeah, I see it
removed.
differently,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's got so much to offer as a space.
Mm.
So So yeah, the balance is there. But yeah, like I say, I've got young children. I've got um, a lot going on. So it's just getting up in the morning and not feeling tired is always
You take
is
that.
always good for me.
That
I
works.
have I have a skin condition in my eye to sort of see the effects seasonally, and I get affected
What
by
happens? What does it go red or?
I don't know what it's called, but I know other people who've got it. But I think it's connected to sort of pollen and UV
Right.
levels, but it's just
What does it
something.
feel like for you? Does it make
It
your eyes
feels like
weepy? Or
I get very black eyes, and as if
oh,
you're
okay,
very tired. But then they
right,
get quite sore, and then if your eyes water because it's kind of cold out, it stings quite a lot, and then it gets
right.
worse and redder, and it looks like you've essentially not gone to bed and
Been
drank a bottle of
partying all
whiskey
night.
before you did. And every now and then, like a couple of times a year, I'll have a week, 2 weeks where it's bothering me, and
Mm.
that's more from a perception that you're.
Yeah.
But I wear glasses as like you do, and I just
Mm.
tend to put my glasses on at that point, um, and just and try not to worry about it too much. And I've got creams I have to put on it when it comes. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the only thing that really
Fine.
bothers me.
And finally, Alex, to end on a positive note, what are the things that bring you joy and make you happy?
Um, Family, I've got a lovely family. That's
Mm.
always really good. I've talked about this recently actually. I'm really lucky what I do. It's an amazing space to work in. We're constantly talking about reminding ourselves that we make perfume for a living and we sell perfume for a
Yeah.
living.
Things
If
that
ever I
bring
get in a
joy.
taxi and someone says, "What do you do?" and you say, "I make perfume," that opens up so many questions and people are really
Yeah,
interested. I'm
it
forever
does.
grateful that I do what I do because it's really good fun and
Because everyone will have an
it's hard
opinion on
work.
it, won't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone's got an
People.
opinion on it. Everyone wears things,
Yeah.
and we'll ask you about other things. And I get to travel and I get to do so. So having a
Mm.
work life that actually brings the work also brings a certain amount of joy. I think
Yeah.
I was going to say what my dad's got a house he's got a really small house in France that he bought maybe 12 years ago. When my grandparents passed away, they had a tiny little house in Burnley, and tiny amount of money came out of this, and he just managed to get this little place in France. It's not,
Right. Nice.
um, it's not on the Riviera or anything. It's in a farming country in a place called Montauban. But in the summer we go down, and my sister and she's got young children as well, and we'll spend 2 weeks there as like the two families and my dad and his wife. And the point when you get the kids to bed and
You can crack open a bottle.
and there's a bottle of wine and someone's
Yeah.
cooking something nice and it's
Lovely.
warm and you know that you're going to and then I love listening to music, so I'll put some music on and and me and my brother-in-law have got very similar taste in music, so then we'll spend the evening just talking about different things we like and have you heard this and have you heard that, and just drink
Yeah.
more wine until the point where it's
Yeah. Yeah.
I do that for 2 weeks and it doesn't and every year it doesn't really change, and that
Love it. Oh, Alex, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and an insight to hear more about you and the world of Miller Harris and yeah, how you bring these beautiful products to life. And I'm certainly looking forward to the new launches in May. It'd be
well,
great
thanks, Hayden. Yeah,
to
that's
hear
great.
about
It's been
that.
really
But
good.
yeah, well, look, thank you.
Yeah,
I hope the rest of the day goes well and appreciate your time.
brilliant. Thanks, Hayden.
Thanks, Alex.
See you later.